sharing their insights about the importance of having women at the forefront of food systems transformation, the challenges that they face, and what we could all do collectively to ensure that women's voices are heard. So I'm very excited to hear from them, and I'm sure you are too. And I'm so happy to see so many people joining this webinar today. So without much further ado, let me invite the first of the many amazing women, Francine Picard, co-founder and director of partnerships at the Shamba Centre, who will be setting the scene for the discussion to follow. Francine?
Thank you very much, Tin. So good morning and good evening, wherever you are, and welcome to the Shamba Centre for Food and Climate discussion on women driving food system transformation. As we celebrate women and their contribution to this society this March, we have asked ourselves, what is the unique value women are bringing to the food and agriculture community? What are the innovative action, practical strategies, ideas that women use to have a positive impact in our society sector? So for me, while I was reflecting on this question, not long ago, the world received a lesson on how women lead and their uniqueness or their leadership style. I quote, "I'm leaving because such a privileged position comes with great responsibility. The responsibility of knowing when you are the right person to lead and also when you are not." These words were spoken by none other than Jacinda Ardern, the Prime Minister of New Zealand, who has brought a new style of leadership to the forefront, the one that is focused on empathy and social justice. She brought a breath of fresh air. Yes, she confirms that women are different leaders. Ardern's style is a testament to the fact that women have a different approach to leadership, one that emphasizes collaboration, empathy, and inclusivity. In my young year, I studied Bourdieu and Shakespeare, who suggested that women leaders favor cooperation and human relation, led collegially, based on notion of power with rather than power over. They also recognized women's tendency to innovate. So whether the unique value that women bring to the food and agriculture community goes beyond just their leadership style. Women have been instrumental in transforming the way we think about and approach agriculture, from advocating for sustainable farming practices to championing food justice security. This question is particularly important for Shamba Centre for Food and Climate, as a woman-led organization that stands to transform the way we think about and approach agriculture and food. So to further explore this question, we are excited to invite Tin Lee, a journalist specializing in climate change and agriculture, who has shown a spotlight on women who are making a difference in the agriculture and food system. In her piece, The Dazzling Dozen, Tin Lee highlighted 12 remarkable women who are transforming the industry with their innovative approaches and unique perspective. So as part of our inquiry, we have invited Tin Lee to interview 4 of amazing women to gain insight into their motivations, their work processes, their aspiration and innovation in the food system. So we are really eager to learn more about the impact they have had on their peers as well on the industry. So let's now give the floor to Tin Lee and let's listen to this extraordinary woman. Tin, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Francine, for those comments and for promoting the newsletter and the issue where I featured, the 12 women that I knew and whose work I really admire. And I think one of the reasons I wrote that issue was just because there's so many people who are suddenly really interested in food systems and, the impact that food has on pretty much everything that we do every day of our lives. But a lot of the times they don't know where to start. They don't know who to turn to. And I really just thought there's so many amazing women who are doing such incredible work that I think it's only fair that we promote them. So that's how that issue came into being. And I'm so happy to say that 2 of the dozen is going to be on the discussion today. So let me now introduce you to all of our speakers. First, we have Shakuntala Haraksingh-Tilstad, who's the Director of Nutrition, Health and Food Security Impact Area Platform for the CGIAR. She's also a World Food Prize laureate. We also have Nima Lugangira, a member of parliament in Tanzania. Now, Nima has also a long history of working on nutrition and inclusion issues. We also have Beatriz Gaguba, founder and executive director of African Women Agribusiness Network, or AWAN for short. Beatriz is actually joining us despite a power cut, so we really appreciate you going the extra mile to be with us today, Beatriz. And last but definitely not the least, we have Karen Smoller, co-founder and executive director of the Shamba Centre. Now, how this is going to work is that I have about 4 rounds of questions to our speakers, and then, Francine will again do the wrap up. But we do want the audience, you, to participate as well. And I see that already, you're introducing yourself in the chat box, but also feel free to respond to what some of the speakers are saying with your thoughts and recollections. And if you disagree as well, right? I think this is a place where we should be able to have the kind of discussions. We don't always have to agree. I think the important is that we have this platform and use that to have those discussions. Now, I'm going to start off the discussion with the same question to all of our speakers. Why is it important to have women leaders at the forefront of food systems transformation? And what, according to you, is the unique value add that women leaders bring in this debate? Now, Shakuntala, can I start off with you?
Thank you, Thin, and thank you, Francine, for inviting me. It's nice to be together with such an illustrious group and so many women at this event. We all know that at least 1 in 2 food systems actors is a woman. And so that talks for itself. If we should want to prosper and want to transform food systems for healthy people and planet, then we must bring this more than half, or at least half, of the population to be able to do so. We also know that women face lots of issues in wanting to be heard and wanting to be at the table. And there are many discriminatory structures. If you just take the issues on land ownership, access to water, access to financial systems, wage and labor policies which do not favor women. And even when we talk directly about food and food systems and consumption, we know that women are discriminated in their own households and among their own family members. But despite all of this, we know the issues, we know that there are means to overcome these issues, and not only to overcome these issues just by women, but by all of us who are engaged in policies, engaged in the food systems. And therefore, we must give space and ensure that women have their representation at all levels, locally, nationally, and also internationally. And if we do this and ensure and give space and encourage and have women, because of course, being engaged takes time. It needs a lot of work. It needs a lot of energy. And we know that women have much more to do than be engaged in food systems. But this representation and acknowledging and affirming the contributions of women in food systems would really go a long way, because then we would include their opinions, their ideas, their knowledge. And there's a lot of knowledge embedded in what women bring with them, not only from themselves, but from their mothers and their grandmothers. And we must build on this in order to transform and have better food systems that are healthy for all people. So if can you ask me what's the unique value I see women bring? And I think it's their shared concern and engagement in balancing the needs of all household members, and especially young children. So as leaders and active members at all levels, they can bring this shared concern, this engagement, include everyone and the concerns of everyone, and together with their shared knowledge and interests, also traditional knowledge, we can put all this together to transform food systems in a very positive direction. And we should be doing this fast. We have up to 2030 to the Sustainable Development Goals. Thank you.
Thank you, Shakuntala. And yeah, thanks for reminding us of the looming deadline for the SDG. And I really like particularly the points you make about the shared concern and the embedded knowledge that women have, and of course different levels where women leadership is required. And I now want to go to a national leader, Nima, who is a lawmaker in Tanzania. Nima, can I come to you next to answer this question?
Yes, no problem.
So yeah, tell us why it's important that women leaders should be at the forefront and what value adds they bring.
Thank you. I think, first of all, as you introduced me, I'm Neema Lugangira, Member of Parliament in Tanzania. And women being at the forefront, it's very important because we understand the issues from a place at home. We live the issues. So we can become better advocates for improving the environment for women. Just in my case, I started up working in a public-private partnership organization, which was part of government, SAGCOT, Southern Agricultural Growth Corridor of Tanzania, that was focusing on accelerating agriculture in the regions which are the food basket of Tanzania. These regions produce about 70% of the food in Tanzania. But whilst working there, I was heading the policy department, and I came to realize that there are gaps in policy in the sense that these regions that are high, food producing regions are also the regions with high malnutrition, which to me was like, it shouldn't be the case. If a place has a lot of food, there shouldn't be any malnutrition. But coming to drill down further, you come to find that, about 60 to 70% of the population are in agriculture, and 80% of them are women. And that can explain perhaps the malnutrition rate in women.
I think Nima may be having some sort of connection issues. We apologize for that. We'll go back to her once she is back. Beatrice, would you like to take a hand at answering this question while we wait for Nima to join back?
Maybe we give her a couple of minutes. Maybe she has a net a connection problem, or maybe I can, go in.
Yes. Yeah, we'll go back to Nima once she comes back. So please.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you very much, also Francine and Karine, for inviting me. I think I joined the other speaker to saying that. Where I'm coming from on the continent, I think this is the only place where when we meet, when African women meet, they say, hello, my sister, even if we don't know each other. And so I want to pick it from where Shakuntala said it, that word sister for us on the continent, it means you are my sister, even though you're not my biological sister, is because we are sharing something. We are sharing the burden of everything that drives society. Yeah. And this is something that we learn when we are young girls, as she said, through our mothers, our grandmothers. And it doesn't matter where you grew up in town or you grew up in the rural area, it's the same. That transmission of that you being a woman, we have something that we share that is special than when a men call each other brother, it doesn't have the same connotation. I think the fact that we call each other sisters there's something that is unique, that they recognize that whoever they call sister next in line is somebody who can one day solve their problem. So when you come, if I come back to that's a unique shared concern. When I come back to the food system, and I think I will also echo what my sister Shantala said, is that yes, 80% of the food we eat and on the continent is produced by women. And I think this is something very special that we overlook. Myself being a food security expert for many years from you and doing it all over, and also in nutrition, is that we always overlook the other power and knowledge of the women that they carry in themselves. When we are writing our proposal or our concept notes or whatever, doing our research, we forget that there is another knowledge, another way of doing things that these women have been doing that. If we all, from time immemorial, women have been at the center of the food production that we eat, the continents. And when it comes that, if you're looking at the household level, at the community level, even at the national level, they are the ones who either they are producing or they are processing or they are transforming. But guess what? In the middle of it, the middleman is always the men, but 90% of the food value chain is the women. And we ask ourselves, and that's where the role of the women leaders is very important, is that we can advocate, articulate, increase the volume of the voice and how we want the governments, the private sector, the international organization, we can advocate for transformation of the food system by modernizing, by allocating more funds to the system. I hope that our sister from Tanzania, from the policy level, she will talk about it. And we always, this is very important, especially now when we're all going through the global crisis. I see it through my network, which I will talk about later. And I think this is, coming back to that, the women leaders, because of that link and that sisterhood and that knowledge that is not written anywhere, we don't put in our documents, it is what make us better leaders to advocate and engage. And when women do something, they go an extra mile more than men, especially when it's touching, when it comes to food system. There's a lot of buzz about food system now and food security, but we don't go back to the beginning. The beginning is at the beginning of it all, there is a woman who's either tilling the land of her family or as a laborer, yeah? And then that whole value chain goes, it's only women. So if we have more, I think this is a very important panel and issue. And Tim, thank you very much for bringing this type of questions, because it's showing again that the more women will be engaged in leading the value chain, the food system, the more voice will have and will be heard, and there'll be transformation. The more we bring in the government, the private sector to get involved to improve the food system. But they have to put at the centrality of it, they have to put women into that. Thank you.
Thank you, Beatrice. We definitely want to, come back to you about the private sector and the agribusiness and how important, it is for women, not just to be leadership in terms of research, academic, science, and politics, but also in the private sector as well. Now, I understand that Nima has joined again. Is that true? If so, can we have Nima back before we hear thoughts from Karen? I think Nima's trying to join, apparently. I'm told. Okay, I think we're still waiting for Nima. Karen, do you want to take a stab at it while we're still trying to sort out Nima's connection? I mean, we've heard about the fact that having more women, amplifies it. We have shared concerns, all these embedded knowledge. What else? What other value adds? Why do we need it? I mean, I think a lot of us know the fact that, all the discrimination and imbalances. So I'm giving you the hard question. What else can you say that others haven't already said?
So I think that it's really important what the three previous women have said about women doing the bulk of the work in the food system. But women leaders are not at the forefront of the food system. So whilst women do the bulk of the work, they're not the ones making the decisions. They're not the ones making the decisions on the farm. They're not the ones making the decisions in the home. They're not the ones making the decisions in the marketplace. And sadly, not even our international organizations on food and agriculture do we see women leaders. So let's just take FAO and IFAD as two examples, two organizations I love and I work with closely, never had a woman leader. Let's take IFPRI, you know, the food policy think tank, never had a woman leader. These organizations employ lots of women, but they are rarely found in senior management. And so women are simply not being given the opportunity to make the big decisions. And I believe that's why, one of the reasons at least, why the food system is in crisis. So I'll just give you one example. One of my heroes that I think was in your Dazzling Dozen article is Esther Panunia, who's the Secretary General of the Asian Farmers Association. She's been trying to convince donors to set up a trust fund that will directly finance farmer organizations and cooperatives so that they don't have to go through these lengthy, complicated bureaucratic processes to get third-party funding. The evidence base is very clear on this point. We know that farmers who are members of farmers organizations have higher productivity and higher income. We know that they get better access to inputs like seeds and fertilizers. We know they get better access to transport and logistics services, credit. And yet Esther is struggling to get this fund off the ground, to get them the financing they need. It's a no-brainer, and I don't know what's stopping the donor community from supporting initiatives like this with women leaders that have a clear impact, positive impact to have. So that's one of the unique things that women bring. I mean, this broader question on the unique value of women. Let's take a look at the recent histories of the World Bank and the IMF. So these are two institutions, Bretton Woods institutions, who in the 90s were basically accused of fueling poverty because of their structural adjustment programs. And on the one side, we're seeing real reforms at the IMF since Christine Lagarde and now Kristalina Georgieva took over. Both women went against the traditional economic grain and have basically allowed the IMF to become one of the key institutions leading the way in the recoveries from recent crises, the COVID recovery, the food crisis recovery, and now the debt crisis. So just think about the special drawing rights that were issued, which were unheard of before, that have now been made available. Think about the strong push for large-scale social protection programs. This is stuff we'd never heard the IMF come out with in the past. And then we contrast that to the World Bank, which has never had a woman leader, has failed to reform from its old ways, and whose current president is a climate denier. I don't think women are better than men. Women are not better than men, but many of us women have been nurtured to question ourselves, to look within, to be self-critical. And while I actually believe some of this nurturing has too often held us back and made us feel like we're not worthy of leadership roles, when we are able to dim the voice and break through that glass ceiling, women have shown an incredible capacity to lead. And those three examples I gave, I think, exemplify that idea of how women leadership can be transformative.
Thanks so much, Karen. Lots of food for thought. Very, very, provocative as well. And I love it. And yes, so agree with you on the FAO and IFAD. WFP is having yet another female leader, right? Executive director. And yet the other two, we still have not had a female leader. It would be great to see also, if IFPRI and some of the big CG centers have female director generals. That would be great. Nima is back. Nima, can we have you back on the screen? Welcome back. Thank you so much. You were just talking about how you got into this.
Yeah, thank you so much. And it seems that digital connectivity is not that good either in New York, because I was surprised. I've been struggling to get back on. But let me just start off very quickly and being mindful of time, is the importance of women leaders in pushing forward the food systems agenda. I can start by making reference to our president. Tanzania has the only female president and head of state in Africa, Her Excellency President Dr. Samia Suluhu Hassan. And in a short period of within a year of her being into power, the agriculture budget has almost tripled. In the 2021-2022 budget, the agriculture budget was somewhere around 125 million US dollars. But in the budget 2022-2023, it has almost tripled to approximately about 407 million US dollars. And the push behind that is the fact that our president understands that not only agriculture is the backbone of the economy, but also understands that 60 to 70% of Tanzanians are in agriculture, and out of that, about 80% are women. So if we are going to transform our economy, if we're going to eradicate poverty, if we are going to truly capacitate and empower women, then we need to look at the agriculture sector. So that in itself is a pure example of the importance of having women leaders. But another example, ever since our president was the vice president, she championed the nutrition agenda. And she came with a very, very unique approach to it, in the sense that she decided to sign contracts, commitment contracts for achieving nutrition milestones with regional commissioners of all regions of Tanzania mainland. So that happened around 2017. And even after becoming president, Her Excellency President Dr. Samia Suluhu Hassan yet again reviewed the implementation of the initial contracts between 2017 to 2022 and signed new contracts with all regional commissioners under her current position of president. So why is she carrying this agenda of nutrition? Because she understands malnutrition impacts most women and children. Malnutrition contributes towards maternal death, contributes towards, children being sick all the time. And when children are sick all the time, it means women are not able to be productive. Malnutrition affects women in different kinds of ways, but it also impacts government's budgets when you have to contribute on these issues of the well-being of women. So that again proves the importance of having women at the forefront. But also myself, as Nima Lugangira, what I was mentioning earlier is the fact that I worked as head of policy at a public-private partnership organization as head of policy. And we were focused on, it's called SAGCOT, and we're focused on accelerating agriculture in the Southern Highland regions. These are the regions that produce about 60 to 70% of the food in Tanzania. So they are our food baskets. But whilst working there, I came to realize that there was a gap in terms of our focus on agriculture. We tended to focus more on productivity rather than consumption. And as a result, the women were being most affected. The women were being more malnourished because, believe it or not, the area that has the highest percentage of malnutrition in Tanzania are these regions that are food baskets. So it means that women spend a lot more time in the farms. They forget to feed themselves. The children are also malnourished. But then there's that notion of focusing on productivity rather than consumption. So you'll find households, they have eggs, they have milk, but the children are not allowed to drink it. Everything goes to market. But at the same time, it also gave me the understanding of the challenges that women endure: access to land, access to finance. Because for you to get finance, you need collateral. If you don't have collateral, what happens? But even access to inputs, believe it or not, the access of inputs, seeds, fertilizer, pesticides for women is so much more different. And even the access to market, you find that these women smallholder farmers don't tend to go to the market. They sell to middlemen, and those middlemen are the ones who go to market. So even the amount of money that they get they don't get, value for their produce and all of those things. But even a small thing as having daycare facilities at, in the farms.
Mhm.
So you find women have to go with their children. Children are left uncared for, etc. So I think, we cannot understate the importance of having women leaders at the forefront of pushing the food systems agenda. Thank you.
Yeah, Nima, while I still have you and while New York Internet Connection is still staying, could I just ask you one more question? Because we're going to start the next round and we're running a little bit late. So it would be great if you could keep this a little bit concise.
Okay.
And this question I have because, you're a lawmaker and you have the power to change these structural imbalances that you just mentioned, right? Can you tell us a little bit about some of the strategies that you've implemented, to empower women in the food systems?
Thank you. So one of the things that I've been doing personally in Parliament is championing law reform, especially on the issue of land rights, because we have conflicting laws and customary laws, etc. But second is to I set up an informal group of members of Parliament championing issues of food safety, because understanding that when we're talking about food systems, food safety is important. But thirdly, very quickly, is understanding that as legislators in the continent, and the African continent being, we have huge agricultural potential, but we have high food losses. We spend a lot of money importing as opposed to exporting, while we can be self-sufficient. So understanding the importance of legislators, I've been championing the establishment of the African Food Systems Parliamentary Network. And just this week, we're from Nairobi, where we had a meeting with the African Union to discuss under the CAADP processes. And we were members of Parliament from 14 African countries, and we agreed to set up the African Food Systems Parliamentary Network. And I was fortunate to be among the 4 who has been given the opportunity or the challenge to kind of figure out the formation of this. So I hope through this we can also collaborate with all of you in strengthening our role as legislators in this process.
Great, that's really interesting to hear, not just a national project, but a regional project, and hopefully we'll see, a lot of positive impacts from it. Thank you, Nima. Beatrice, can I come to you again? You're also on the ground running your own business, but you also lead this, agribusiness women network. Are you seeing more women entering the sector, the agribusiness sector? And if so, is this changing the way business is done?
Thank you, Tin. Yes, I think what is different today is that we can document and be through research and surveys, we can say yes. Compared to 10 years ago, we can say we have so many women who are in agribusiness, not informal. This idea that the African woman who is who is working in the field or in the food system is informalized, and we can't help them because they're in informal sector. And I think today is not true because we have evidence-based statistic information showing that we have women also who have, against all odds, without any assistance, what just Nima just said, without any access to land, because access to land or access to finance or access to anything, who have started their businesses and they are being successful. So I think the way we look at it at One Africa, I think the challenge is not, I like always to say that money has no gender, but it's the way that gender access the money that is a challenge for us, because we are excluded to access, whether it is a formal or cultural, because the relationship also between women and money is also something that even for Europe and America, it took a long time to people to accept that the women can, yes, do business, be rich, and and take a position where the power position. So in agribusiness, it's interesting to see that there are through our platform of 3,000 registered businesses in 44 African countries and 500,000 informal this small business. And we see the new entrance of young women, young agripreneurs who are bringing fresh ideas, innovation, and really. And it's interesting, and they are graduates, and they don't, they go there and lease land. Even if they don't have access to the land, they lease land. They're bringing odd, they're not waiting that the government and the private sector comes to their rescue, but they're doing that. And most of the time, I think Shakantula will agree with me that we neglect that missing middle. The middle, when we talk about small, medium, and large, because in our network, we have small, medium, and large. The middle business people, agripreneur, they are not, we leave them behind because everyone thinks, oh, okay, they have $100,000 revenues in a year, and yet they forget that the one who are feeding the large one and the one buying from the small one. And when they buy from some small one, they address the issues of production, of quality for input, what Nima was saying, they address the issue of quality, of safety of the food, and they are helping them to graduate. Because when they go to the small one, they say, look, I'm not gonna buy your bananas no more because your banana is not the same length and the same quality that I wanted, but through that, they get used to that. And then they, without any formal thing, which I'm not saying it should not be there, but it takes a long time. Who's going to pay for it? In business, you're not there to pay for things that government should be paying for that. But we're cutting short through that women, our platform of women buying from women and women promoting other women. I think it's a proof for us that is very. It's a way of moving forward and not waiting for things to happen. And what I would like to commend here is that in most of, Nima talked about CADEP. Look, we have all of us in our governments. They all have CADEP. We have all the policies and the strategy in place. But guess what? Who has to implement? It's the private sector, and also the government has to put mechanisms that we facilitate. So. This I'll go back again to these young women also, they are really bringing in fresh, and we have 50% of our network is under 35 years of age, if we use the African Union definition of youth. And it's different. They are taking where their mothers had it before, and they are bringing in, they're putting science behind it. They're putting marketing behind it. And I think the most interesting thing, I think it's Karin who's mentioning it, what we need, where we are today, is no longer to discuss the challenges in agriculture, the everything, and where she's right, and what we should be doing after this is to, how do you mobilize an investment fund, that will be catering for the small, medium, and large agribusiness in the agriculture space. We will not have food systems if we don't have that capital. We cannot get from the bank. Even us who are in large business, they don't give us capital. They say, oh, she's exaggerating. Why can she go for so much money? Now imagine if they say to us that this kind of thing, what did they say to this young? The parents are not willing to give the title deeds to go to the bank as a collateral. The husband is not willing to vouch for them. No one is there to give them a guarantee what everyone requires in the financial structured system. So we have to really come up with an investment fund that will be affordable and flexible to suit that sector and the business volumes that they are in the value chain of that agribusiness, to be able to say, yes, this is where we go, and that's how we go it. Otherwise, next year, every 8th of March, every year, we'll be talking about the same challenges, yet we know where's the problem and where's the solution. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Beatrice. Sorry to cut you short, which is running a little bit late. But, Shakuntala, Beatrice talk about mention some of the issues that you talked about. And I think you are also the one that said that we know the problems. We just need, and we already know the solutions as well. We just need to do it. And you've been working on this, right? Breaking the cycle of hunger and poverty among women for a very long time. What are some of the biggest challenges that you have faced? And perhaps some of the biggest rewards that you have as well? If you could just spend the next 2 minutes talking about that, that would be great.
Thank you, Finn. And I'll choose one part, and this was mentioned before. We hear in this event, we are talking about food systems, and we still keep to the first part of the food systems, production systems and the inputs to production. By the time we reach to the supply chains, as our last speaker was talking, and we reach the consumption, everyone has gone home or has fallen asleep. So the most rewarding part of the work that I have been doing in the field is beginning with nutrition sensitive approaches and beginning at the part of the food systems that deals with consumption. And the focus that I have been having on women, pregnant and lactating women, and children throughout breastfeeding, but also from the age of 2 years up to 2 years, the first 1,000 days of life. And that for me has been extremely rewarding if we would understand how important this period is for good nutrition, for building cognitive capacity, for growth and development, and understanding the intergenerational benefits we can have. A well-nourished woman gives birth to a well-nourished child, who is well-fed, develops cognitively at a higher level, and when that child gets to school, has a better school performance, a better work performance, is a healthier adult, and this intergenerational benefits is so very important. What I would like is to get governments and international organizations to put a value on this on this intergenerational benefits that we get by nourishing the woman and nourishing the child. And that value must not just be put in terms of monetary value. As I said before, how do you put a value on cognition? How do you put a value on the school performance? So we must be very smart and find better ways, to value the benefits we have of a holistic food systems which give well-nourished people. Thank you, Finn.
Thanks, Shakuntala. It's always, yeah, we know this, I think, a lot with in terms of nutrition about the intergenerational and long-term consequences, but a lot of the times I don't think we give it as much thought as it is due. Karen, I want to come back to you. You co-founded the Shamba Centre for Food and Climate to quote, and I quote, disrupt the global food systems to end hunger. Why do we need to do this? Why do we need global food systems to be disrupted?
So I think it's basically because of what we've seen in the past decade, where we've moved from crisis to crisis. We've had at least 3 food crises in just over a decade, not to mention the multiple other crises that have impacted food, like the pandemic, the droughts and floods, the wars. We've wiped out 15 years of progress just last year. So that's why we started the Shamba Centre, and that's why we believe we need to disrupt the system to stop this crisis roller coaster. Now, I don't think everything we've done before has been ineffective. I think we've actually been very effective at finding single solutions to single problems. So, for example, all the R&D investments in improving yields of wheat and corn and soy so that we could have more food produced on each hectare of land was very effective for those specific crops. Developing synthetic fertilizers to put nutrients into soil was very effective to add nutrients to poor soils. But every time we focused on a single solution, came all these unintended consequences and a multitude of other problems that we're now faced with and now have to deal with. So at Shamba, we try and avoid looking at the single problem and the single solution, and instead we start with the system. And when we look at the system, we look at multiple entry points where we can achieve interconnected solutions and where we can see multiple outcomes to solve problems rather than single outcomes. What that means concretely, just one example, for those of you who were at our launch, we had this agri-entrepreneur Nameka from Cold Hubs, who's invented this decentralized cold storage unit that's powered by renewable energy. So just think about it. Cold storage units, cold storage infrastructure available in markets across Nigeria, free of fossil fuels and able to give longer shelf life to fruits, vegetables, and dairies. So with one idea, we contribute to climate change, to improve nutrition, and to reducing food loss and waste. And that's the kind of systemic approach we want to take at the Shamba Centre.
Great, thanks, Karen. That was a very, very illustrative example. And yeah, I think Coal Hubs, what they're doing is amazing, really interesting as well. Now, we have one final round of questions. And also, I just should say that there are some questions in the chat box. So speakers, please feel free to look through. And if you want to respond, please do. But for this round, Beatrice, can I start this one with you? Earlier, you talked about the fact that there are more young women more women are entering the sector, but more young women as well. You're saying half of the women in your network are under 35, which sounds fascinating. Now I'm curious, and this is going to sound a little bit like a generalization, and I don't mean to, but there is this perception, and I think a lot of the speakers today have addressed that as well, that women business leaders are more committed to the ongoing transition towards sustainable agriculture than men. Is that true? And if so, in what way? And if you could keep the answer to 2 minutes, that would be great, because I think we're standing in between people's lunch.
Yes, I think I don't want to repeat what I said earlier. I think it is proven. I think the women business leaders are not coming in only bringing their knowledge, but they also their understanding on how the food systems and the social issues behind it, and they're bringing a traditional knowledge that is in there, and also this their commitment and their passion makes it that they become an example. I can give an example of young women who are really one or two who are really driving the system. We have a young woman in Namibia who is trading in the blue economy, and she producing oysters. And the way she has put the group of and she's 28 years old, and the way she has put all the other women around it to be able to bring them into the value chain of her production and volume of the business into that is amazing. I can go on and on. In each region in Africa, we have that. So I think I don't want to overemphasize the role of the women business, because we live by examples. If they see one is succeeding, then they say, okay, they encourage the other. There's this thing about an extra mile, an extra thing that, because they also know what their mothers and aunties and grandmothers have gone through in terms of not discrimination, the inequalities of the system. But what I see transpiring from them is that they are talking about issues of equity. Equity in the business. They are bringing something new. They for them, the young women are, they're already empowered when it comes to gender. But what they are bringing something interesting here is the issue of equity. Why is not they cannot get this just because they're women? So it's a fact that they know they've been empowered by education, by their parents, second, third generation of women. But it's this new thing about equity, I think, is going to take and brought by young women, because they can't accept they're there, they're in the rural area, it's not mechanized, it's not transformed, and they have an Android phone, they are learned, and it's very, we can't stop that to see what is coming in. And what is coming in is new, is interesting, and is good for women equity into business.
Great, thank you so much, Beatrice. Karen, can I come back to you again? I was going to actually ask you about, what are you most proud of in terms of your work? Because Shamba is very, young, but you've been working on this for a very long time. But there's also a question in the chat box that I thought I'm going to throw this to you. You could take either you can talk about what you're proud of, or this question about asking about some of the concrete ways in which the private sector working in agri supply chains can improve the inclusion of women. If you have any specific examples that you want to touch on, please feel free to.
Yeah, I'll take that one. So I would say I'm going to give an example of an initiative that we're part of that emerged from the UN Food System Summit, which is the Zero Hunger Private Sector Pledge, which is basically a tool to encourage companies to pledge financial contributions to invest in 90 odd low and middle income countries. And in the 10 areas that emerged from this report that I was part of, Ceres 2030. And what we see in this pledge, we now have 44 companies who've pledged over $500 million in 47 countries. And we've got very small pledges and SMEs, pledges starting from $100 up to our biggest pledge at like $160 million. So a huge range. But what we're interestingly finding is that a lot of the SMEs are women-led, women entrepreneurs. And they're not only innovating in their space, but they're also saying, we want to be part of this movement because we want the bigger companies to be investing in us. We want to be integrated into those value chains. I think of the 44 companies, of the 47 countries where investments have been made, 46 of the 47 are in Africa. So we're seeing a high number of pledges being driven in Africa, which we know is the continent that has the most transformation to be done in the food system. So I think this is a great way of women entrepreneurs, women SME leaders being able to access other sources of private sector finance.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Karen. And I really also hope, the fund that ASTA is working on that you mentioned will also, really get off the ground, because that's definitely another way of getting women involved in these value chains, right? And you need essentially people to fund them. Shakuntala and Nima, now I'd like you to talk about how to increase the participation of women. I mean, this flows through Karen's answer. Karen's asking about, Karen's question was about women's participation, in the value chains. But for you, both of you in the leadership position, I'd like you to talk about from your perspective where you are. Shakuntala, I'd like to start with you first. What is the one big idea do you think you have, to increase women's participation across the many sciences that are related to food and nutrition?
Thanks, Vin. When we worked with the UN Food System Summit up to 2021, in Action Track 4, which I co-led, we focused on youth, women, and traditional groups. And what I found was interesting in the way that we should move forward and move fast is to give groups, youth, women, indigenous peoples, the new technologies that, and we are seeing some divide in this between sexes, between males and females. But if we should be using the newer technologies to make them accessible and usable for all. And at the same time, I want to go back to my point about traditional and indigenous knowledge on the food system, on foods, and on nutrition. In many parts of the world and in many population groups, traditional knowledge is captured in a different way. It's, so for example, storytelling. So we have to be able to bridge these new ways with data technologies with the ways that we have from generations, for example, with storytelling. How do we bring these two together so that we get best use of the future and the past? I do think that many times when we are moving forward, we are moving fast, which is good, but we are also moving at the expense of what we have had before. And that, and now with data technologies and all these new innovations we have ways to be able to bridge both, do it fast and move forward. Thank you.
That's a great point. Thank you. And I think a lot of the times we get excited about new technology and forget about the fact that sometimes it can actually, lead to a widening of the gaps, or forgetting about indigenous knowledge, as you say. So this is great. Nima, before I turn it back to Francine, last but definitely not the least, can you tell us how you can use your influence to support and empower other women, and whether be it for nutrition, for inclusion, or just in the political arena?
Thank you. And I think when I'm responding, I'm going to combine with some of the questions that were put on the chat. Firstly, I think that it's very important for us to find ways in which we can promote and create an enabling environment for having more women leaders. Most of the issues that we're speaking about are at community level. So for example, in Tanzania, we're going to have local government elections next year in 2024, and then we have general elections in 2025. So one of the things that I have started working on is to champion reform in our Political Parties Act, which can enshrine and pave way for political parties to nominate women for these candidacy positions. So introducing candidate quotas, because the more women we have at community level who are leaders, at ward level who are leaders, at district council level who are leaders, similarly members of parliament, it means in the discussions, in the decision-making meetings, in the discussions, they will be able to talk about and advocate for these issues that are critical for women. But secondly, is to continue championing the issue of gender equality in agriculture. There's someone who asked about a model law on gender equality. And to start off with, I think we can strategically, push for and advocate. And this is something that I will also be doing, not only in Tanzania, but also through the African Food Systems Parliamentary Network that we're trying to set up, is to focus on gender equality in agriculture. What policies are needed in place? What changes are needed in place? What things can we do? And I totally understand the importance of private sector, having worked in an organization that was public-private partnership. But even in public-private partnership settings, we need to make sure that women are not the ones who are losing out. Women need to be empowered and get what's worth to them. Finally, I need to talk about the issue of digital inclusion. It's very important to also look at digital inclusion and development, especially in peripheral regions, because most of the farming happens in peripheral regions, and most of these women don't have the digital literacy and skills. It's well and good to develop applications, different apps and different technological innovations, but if women who are the target are not able to use them, if there is no connectivity, if the cost of data is high, the ownership of mobile, the accessibility of electricity, etc. All of these things we need to look at together. And finally, whilst we're doing all of this, we should also promote alternative source of cooking energy for women, because there's a huge impact on climate change. Most of us in the rural communities still use firewood, which as a result of cutting trees. And if that continues, there will be a climate change impact, and the impact of climate change goes into the productivity of agriculture produce, but even the nutrition content of what is being produced. So I'm very excited and happy to carry forward this discussion and to see how we can continue collaborating further in this space. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nima. And I really just hope, this conversation is just one of the first and one of the many to continue. And, I already see people in the chat box saying, the knowledge is so invaluable. Can we have another one? I mean, I could continue listening to you ladies for the next, the whole day. It has been fascinating, but unfortunately we have already run out of time. We did start a little bit late, so I think, thank you so much for the audience also for, staying a little bit later. Can we all give a round of applause to our excellent speakers, a virtual round of applause, I guess, because this is a virtual event. I'm going to pass the baton back to Francine to close. It's been an absolute pleasure for me to moderate the discussion. And Francine, back to you.
Thank you very much, Finn, and thank you very much to all our wonderful speakers. Lisiane and I, actually, we were following the conversation and we put together some of the wording that came straight for the conversation. So this is actually a wonderful image, actually capture most of the work and the discussion that we did have. So I take this opportunity to summarize the key points. And I think that most of you, we highlighted the structural imbalance that men and women are having in the food sector, that also where women are always disadvantaged. We talk about the unequal access to resources and opportunity, the gender-based discrimination, the importance for the farmers to access finance and credit facilities. But we also highlighted the fact that women was on the forefront on this battle, that innovation is part of the way that women are really creative and are also trying to change the food system. We heard about Esther Ponia funds, that we are all actually quite curious to hear about it and try to actually have a push on it. We heard about the fact that knowledge is really important and that we need also to undertake and understand the indigenous knowledge. We also think that when we are coming to consider or innovate in food system transformation, we need to take a systematic approach, that issues such as climate change, soil, biodiversity, water are already there, and that when women are working, they need also to consider those kind of elements. But most importantly, the capacity to lead. We know that women are able, women are capable, but they still lack the space for that kind of leadership. And we need also to ensure that they are not only on the senior position, but they are only leading most of the organization. And this is really part of our battle to have more women and also amplifying their voices. And we find that this month of March is really important because we need to hear more about women, how they are succeeding, what are their fight, what are the solutions that they are bringing to the table, and this conversation needs to continue. So all agree that this meeting was one of the first meetings that Shamba Centre will be doing, trying to put amazing women together to the table and see how we can push toward the agenda. So I would like to thank and take the opportunity of my colleague being in the room to thank all participants and all our wonderful speakers to this wonderful event. And I thank you. Have a lovely day.